Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Podcast. I'm Lauren LaSalle, and I'm a licensed therapist, highly sensitive person, and HSP coach. This bi-weekly podcast is meant for highly sensitive people and their loved ones, as both experiences will be discussed. Thank you for joining me, and let's begin. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Podcast. I'm Lauren, and today's guest is Amy Harris. Inspired by her love for humanity and learning, Amy completed a master's in spiritual science in 2005. Amy has studied spirituality, coaching, business, the nervous system, authentic relating, yoga, pre- and postnatal fitness, somatic practices, graphic design, leadership, and culture. Amy is a shamanic practitioner, embodiment facilitator, and an energy coach. I really enjoyed my conversation with Amy, and I think you will too. She shared a lot of information that hasn't been covered on the podcast before, including how she coaches and things that she works on with her clients. So I'm very excited to have had her on the podcast. And before we get into the conversation, just to remind you that if you have any ideas for episode topics, if you have any questions for me to answer on the podcast, or if you want to write an email sharing your story for me to read on the podcast, you can email me at lauren@laurenlasallecoaching.com. You can find out more about my coaching program, as well as resources and links to my social media by visiting my website at laurenlasallecoaching.com. And you can also sign up for my email list on my website. And by doing so, you will receive a free resource from me called 5 Self-Care Tips for Highly Sensitive People. All right, here is my conversation with Amy. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
Of course. I'm excited to talk to you and hear what you have to share. So what was your experience like discovering that you are a highly sensitive person?
I mean, the initial discovery, I think, I was like 15 or 16. And my therapist said something about it, and I was like, ugh, I am not that. Like, I don't know. It was like I just didn't want to be more weird than I already felt. And so I was initially like kind of ignored it and was just like, no, that's not at all the case. And I think that's kind of normal for a teenager to rebel against whatever is put on you. Mm-hmm. And then again, the same therapist I started seeing her again in my 20s, and she brought it up again. And I like took it on a little more deeply later in my 20s, probably about 10 years later. I would like, oh, like I did the online quiz and got like a super high score. And in my 20s, it made more sense. I was able to understand it more. I think just because I had more life experience and more experience of being in the world on my own. So, yeah. And then from there, what I did with that was try to figure out how to make that powerful, make it something that was a gift, make it something that I could use, make it something that was an attribute rather than a problem. Because most of my relationship with my sensitivity in my childhood was that it was problematic and it was something that had to be solved and there were no solutions and this kid is impossible. And so in my 20s, I just sort of like, what can I do with this? And how can I utilize this not only for myself, but for how I show up in the world? So
that's awesome. Wow. It's so nice that your therapist was aware of high sensitivity, because I feel like it's much more widely known now, but there still aren't enough therapists that are aware of it.
I agree. And it's funny, I even look up like the definition of it. I recently looked up and it said it was like a personality thing. And I was like, I'm not in the science realms, but I don't think this is personality. Like it's actually our nervous systems, guys. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. And I think my mom worked really hard to find her, because my mom knew I would need someone who could be in those realms of sensitivity with me. So having a sensitive mom helped me find a therapist that attuned to that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So, what's it
Yeah.
like growing up with a mom who is also highly sensitive? And are there any tools that you learned from her?
I've been unpacking my childhood a lot lately, and I think it's really easy that your childhood just becomes like the norm.
Hmm.
I knew she wasn't normal. I knew we weren't normal in the sense of like I couldn't eat grilled cheese, I couldn't touch a dandelion, like pizza wasn't allowed. Like, there's all these sort of restrictions, and that's how it felt. It felt to me at the time. It just felt like I just want to be normal, When I was a kid, I just was like, why can't I have the pizza or whatever? Why can't I go to the sleepover? All of that. And looking back now, I see how much because of who she was, she went to the alternative practitioners for me first. So instead of going to an allopathic doctor who usually resulted in, if we needed to go there, we did, but we always went like, okay, is it homeopathics that we need? Is it nutrition that we need? Is it sound healing? Like I had access to, I grew up in a small town, but all of the alternative health people in the town, I had access to acupuncture, all that type of stuff. So that is like really, for the work I do now, it's like a really beautiful thing. And I can really see like, wow, I was so well cared for. I was so held, so much privilege that she knew that stuff. But I think, it was the 80s and 90s. So she was also in the process of discovering it for herself. So she was like, how can I help my kid? Which, in my view, and I don't really remember, hopefully she went to the practitioners as well and got cared for, So so that was a really big gift that I was given by her, was just really, really well cared for.
Do you know how she kind of started finding out about high sensitivity back then?
I have never asked her specifically what she does a lot of research. So she's like constantly buying books and reading. And she was in a course for homeopathics. And I think, I don't know how she got introduced to homeopathy, but homeopathy is a very subtle medicine. If you've never worked with it, it's basically the essence of things get distilled down, and then you're sort of just taking the energy of things in. So I think maybe that was a doorway for her is at some point on her journey, someone was like, try these pills or whatever. And that opened up a doorway for her to kind of explore alternative health. And I think, when I was very young, I had a very bad reaction to allopathic medicines. And so she immediately started going like, well, what else can I do for this person to take care of her and her body? And clearly this is an overreaction to something. So I think it came that way. I think it was just like one thread after another that led her. And she went into the realms of spirituality as well. So she started down that path. And I think that's actually how she found the therapist, was through a spiritual practice or some meditation group or something.
That's so cool. Just that she knew about these things back then, I think is awesome.
Yeah, and I think she was kind of like a hippie maybe, in the 70s. And so she was sort of already in like the alternative mindset. So yeah.
So it sounds like you've continued to take a lot of what kind of she gave you as a child, and you still use that because it's helpful.
Absolutely. I do. And I've also really had to find my own path as well. That's separate. I mean, I think that's a normal part of adulthood, is like, what's my version? And as a kid, I also noticed that a lot of people weren't open to it. And so like my friends would always be like, your mom's so weird, for example, right? And so I learned like, oh, this actually isn't okay. Like alternative medicine is like, people don't like it, right? And so I learned how to be a bridge between like people who function in more practical realms and this more sensitive quiet, subtle practices. So that's something I really feel like I've done well, is like I can be very practical and like in the realms of kind of people who have normal nervous systems, and I can communicate between the two very
Nice.
well.
So you had previously mentioned to me that your
Yeah.
daughter is highly sensitive. So I was wondering, what are the differences between how you experience high sensitivity and how she seems to experience it?
Yeah, we have different, and like we're, one of the things that's similar is she's just as picky of an eater as I was. And I'm like, oh, of course, as the parent who's trying to feed the kid, it's sort of like I'm getting my own medicine back, right? um, but she has, whereas the way I dealt with sensitivity, especially emotional sensitivity, is I would close, shut down, go introverted, get quiet, process internally by myself. And she just blasts it out. I mean, it's like she gets, like if she's watching a show and there's something happening, it's never predictable. But like, for example, one time there was a character eating too many blackberries. She starts screaming at the TV, because she can feel this isn't an okay thing. So that's how she reacts. She goes out with the energy and she gets big and she needs a lot of attention. And that's kind of the opposite from me, where I go in to process and she goes out to process. So that's been I mean, I've had to really work hard to expand my own capacity as someone who's naturally introverted, having a small child by myself who's not, who needs more support than I've actually ever had to give. I've had to continually rise up and meet the moment and like, okay, how can I do this bigger? How can I get, for her? And that's
Wow,
been pretty
that reminds
powerful.
me of myself and my mom, because she's also highly sensitive. She had no idea what this was when I was growing up, but she definitely internalizes things. And I would be loud, and everybody would know if I stubbed my toe or whatever happened. So she had to deal with the same thing. Like,
Yep.
why is this child being so loud? I have to like kind of do something to support her, but I'm also like, I don't know what she's experiencing because that's not how I am. So I can only imagine that it's a lot to to deal with and be a support for her when it's the opposite of how you respond to things.
Yeah. It's been a big learning curve. And, she's 6 now. And I finally feel like, oh, I get it, which means it's about to change. But, we're
Oh,
getting a
good.
really good
Oh,
stride
and
with
she's
it
so lucky
finally.
that
Yeah.
you are aware of
Yeah.
high sensitivity and that you're highly sensitive yourself. I feel like that's such a gift to highly sensitive children to have parents like that.
And I can really see it now, now that I'm a mom, and I can really see how much my mom did to support me. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, it's huge.
So I want to talk a little bit about your coaching. So as a coach for highly sensitive people, what do you tend to work on with clients?
I resisted taking this on like for a long time. And then I finally created a course in 2020 called Sensitivity is a Superpower. And I loved teaching that course. It was really fun to um, teach all the different skill sets I have, because I also was very lucky to be in a ballet program as a child, so that the way that I used ballet, which I didn't know at the time, I know now, was that I was using the movements and the repetition and the ballet is very structured and predictable, but it's movement. So there was a way that I could process everything that my nervous system was picking up all day through movement. So my body has become this like really well attuned system. so that when I started teaching yoga, it was just like, it just clicked right in, and I was able to use my sensitivity to speak and teach and hold space in a way that was really powerful because my body had been trained so well. So because I have this body that's in tune with the mind, I mean, I had to do a lot of rewiring. Ballet is very different than yoga. It's a very different mindset. But once I clicked that mindset into yoga, I started to realize like these different ways of moving the body stimulated different nervous system things. And I started to play with like, what's the posture of this nervous system response and the posture of that nervous system response, and how do you stimulate? And so I like to work with people's bodies a lot. And then if I have clients who are already kind of attuned to the body, then we do more energetic realms. So we start to pay attention to like, one of the things I like to talk about is caring versus carrying. And as sensitive people, we naturally, most of us, a lot of us care like so much about the people in our lives that we end up putting their stuff in our backpack. And we've got this like giant burden of everybody else's stuff with us. And that's the carrying. And so learning like the energetic distinction between how do you care, like what is the posture, the energy of caring for someone versus carrying all their stuff for them. So that's what I do. I also work, I've started to go, it depends on the person, obviously, but I've started to go more into the realms of how they're using their energy in the unconscious realms. And the reason and the way that I can do that is that I have learned how to use my sensitivity as a tool. Like I've really calibrated my capacity. So, for example, before I did all this work that I've been doing for the last 2 years, before I would go to like a farmer's market, I could not be at a farmer's market. It was so hard for me, so much stimulations. It was just like, I felt like sandpaper on my skin. And so for the last few years, I've been doing training that allows me to go into a space like that. And I can feel everything, or I know how to close my bubble a little more safely. So I have this capacity to be like open and feeling everything, or contained and not so impacted. And because I've calibrated that and opened my capacity and built my resilience, I can do like really deep work with people because I can feel, oh, something's off there, or you didn't catch it, or, and it's interesting too. So many people are more sensitive than they even know. And I actually believe that like sensitivity is natural, and that it's kind of more unnatural to shut it down, and like the ways that we like pretend we don't see things or feel things or notice things is is really unfortunate. And part of why we're in the circumstances we are as a collective human situation. But not all of my clients currently identify as sensitive. Although as soon as we start unpacking stuff, it's like very clear that they are. So that's been an edge for me in my own, like talking about what I do, is like not everybody, it's interesting, not everybody wants to admit that they're sensitive because they're sort of a, it's kind of got a bad rap. It's kind of associated with weakness and like timidness, or like it just it doesn't feel empowering always to claim it. And I really want to change that. Like I really want those of us who are sensitive to be like, yeah, I can feel that you're lying. Yes, I can feel that you're distorting something. I can feel that, that plug over there is radiating too much, or whatever. We all have our own ways of feeling and sensing. And, when I get into this realm of sensitivity, that's what I like want to empower us and help us like really understand how to take in and articulate everything that we're able to sense, slow it down and go like, I can feel that, I can feel that, I can sense that, I can smell that. So it's not just this like onslaught of cacophony of chaos just like pouring in at us, but we can really go like, dit, 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 you know, because I just feel like it's not a burden. I mean, it could be if you interpret it that way, but your sensitivity can be like super powerful.
Yeah. Yeah,
Super
for sure.
powerful.
And I love being able to connect with other HSPs to talk about these things, because I feel like it can be so easy to see it as a burden, or maybe that's kind of what people have been telling you, that these things aren't normal or aren't right. So being able to talk to other people who not only have kind of harnessed this as like a superpower, but are helping other people to do the same thing, I think is just so awesome.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. This woman came to me a couple of weeks ago and she had done my course, I don't know, a year or two ago. And she had all these stories of how, like, just a little bit, you know, in 8 weeks of just shifting her mindset and starting to understand her sensitivity, like, all sorts of amazing things had opened up from that. So it can be really, like you said, it's like super helpful to get connected with people who are in the same boat and have figured out a way to not be like, I can't ever leave the house.
Yeah, because I feel like when I first discovered it,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is me, definitely. And that was kind of the end of that. And then when I started to connect with other HSPs, it just made me feel so validated that I felt like, okay, I can kind of be more open about now and just really accept that this is who I am and put it out there, I guess. Like a couple of years ago, I probably never would have started this podcast because I was like, what will people think? You know, people are going to know more about me than they do now because I just don't talk about these things. So yeah, it's so nice to meet other HSPs, and I think it is really empowering. And it's just, yeah, I mean, I know it for me, it's made me feel a lot more accepting of who I am. And I'm so grateful for that.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. If you can have a life where you accept who you are, it's like everything gets easier.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It almost feels like you know, and I don't claim to have like any kind of deep, full understanding of all of this, but it feels like it lives in the category of neurodivergence. You know, like, and so as I feel like as the door opens to acceptance of all the neurodivergence and, you know, all the kind of queerness, it's sort of like we can come out too and be like, also, we're kind of weird too, like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it just feels like there's more, and it might just be the circles and the silos that I live inside of, but I just feel like in general there's a door to say like, come out with your weirdness now, everyone.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, so part of this training that I've been in for 2 years is we're writing a book. And so I've been really looking at my sensitivity, and I love metaphor. So I just wanted to share some of the things that came through as I was writing. You know, I used to feel like I was a leaf in the wind. Like anything that happened would like knock me off center. Like, you know, any comment that was made, I was like collapsed and like crying in the closet about it, you know? And for a while, I was trying to learn how to be the leaf that could control the wind. So it was like I was always trying to like avoid things or ignore things, right? Or like, I can't go over there because that upsets me, right? But what I've really learned how to do is become the wind and remember myself as the wind. And then I can direct the leaf and be in charge of the leaf as well. So there's this sort of dynamic partnership between like the big part of my nervous system, because ultimately I think a sensitive nervous system is just huge. It's like all of the nerves are like extra open, extra available for stimulation, and that is big. It is a big energy. A lot of the highly sensitive people I work with have always felt small. And one of the things I do with them is help them see, like, actually, you're big and you do make an impact. And people around you, like when people say they feel like they have to tiptoe around you because you're big, you have a lot of energy because you have this sensitive nervous system with extra feelers, right? So it's like, can you get it big enough so that you feel your fullness and like be okay there? Another way I like to describe it is like I spent, it's like a highly sensitive nervous system is sort of like a stage that's wired for like, I don't like a Beyonce show, just like lights and tricks and things go up and down and like just this massive thing. And then our culture wants us to fit it into a desk lamp and just like shrink it down and don't say anything. So that can be really painful too. Like it's similar, like it's like you're shrunk and you can't say anything and everything you do is wrong because it takes training to run a Beyonce show. Like you can't just roll up and hit those buttons. You need to know what they do, which lights turn on what, So I'm really like clearly very excited and turned on by starting to understand that like this is powerful, and learning how to use it and channel it and open the door for other HSPs is super fun right now for me.
I love those. That gives a really good visual about what it is to be an HSP or how to really harness that power.
Yeah.
I love that.
Cool. Yeah. Metaphor is I think I talk in metaphor maybe too much, but it works.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does.
Awesome.
So where can people connect with you?
Yeah, I'm really active on Instagram. So my Instagram account is the Amy H. So THE_Amy_H. And then my website is theamyh.com. And I'm going to run another Sensitivity as a Superpower course in September. So if that's interesting, you want to like go a little deeper into the empowered, learn how to become the wind, open up your stage lights a little bit. That's coming up in September, and I'm looking forward to that too.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I think people are really going to love listening to what you have to say. I did.
Awesome. It's been super fun. I'm honored that that I got a chance to be here and be with you. So yay.